I've just been asked to make a comment on sentencing. I'm afraid I'm going to be boringly predictable and tell you that I wholeheartedly agree with those of you who think that our courts let down you people at Barnet. The revolving door justice system, particularly around burglary, doesn't help anybody. And if burglars were given longer custodial sentences, community sentences just don't work for burglary. So you have my support in that. If you are complaining about sentences not being long enough, yes, I'm afraid I would have to say I agree with you.
And I was also asked to make a point there, and I would like to make a strong political point that those of us involved in politics at whatever level constantly ask for a serious look at the sentencing policy and adequate provision to ensure that custodial sentences are available for burglars. If they are locked up, they can't be
Have we still got a microphone in the room?
Very wrong. But I think just following up on what you said about the court, to me, we looked at to make sure it's not one court, so that you go back on using the court back. You know what I mean? That seems to be a waste of police time.
It is a significant part of police time. I'm afraid what you describe would be aspirational rather than possible, because judges are fairly straightforward in their view that they are the most important people in the world, and therefore if they request somebody, they expect them there instantly. There's also a danger that if you send the cop away, he will take some action like arrest somebody else, and he's not available to go back, and then the case will collapse. The slightest chance, any chance, of a case collapsing, it collapses. So I'm sorry, but yes, it is an inefficiency which is built into the system.
Thank you. I'm Fiona Twycross and I'm Assembly Member, London Wide Assembly Member, and also on the Police Inquiry Committee. Given that this is a consultation being carried out by the Mayor's Office of Police and Crime, and that the Deputy Mayor has now left, and nobody appears to be taking notes for this part of the meeting, I just wanted you to clarify for residents what status this part of the meeting has. Are their contributions now going to be put in as part of the formal consultation, and what reassurance can give people to that point?
Okay, I have staff in the room who are taking notes of what's being said. We will feed back anything that you say, both to MOPAC, but also build it into our thinking and our debates that we're having centrally with Mr. Burt and with MOPAC. So believe me, we are still listening to you. This is a consultation. Yes, sir.
Hello. Using the consultation documents, I noticed
How are you doing that, sir?
on page 9 and page...
Hold on, just one moment, sir. I asked this gentleman at the front. But I will come back to you.
Thank you. There's two questions. First of all, about business crime. What will you be doing about crime against factories, offices and shops? Especially shopkeepers probably suffer from crime and what. So we need to obviously look at that.
Okay, in terms of this meeting's about stuff that's going to change. That isn't going to change. We will continue to report, investigate crimes against businesses. It affects the economic vitality of Barnet, and therefore it affects the amount of tax revenue that we can take in, which in the long term affects the amount of police we can put on the streets. We take it seriously.
And the second question is about restorative justice. I mean, I've heard about where the criminal would actually face the victim. But obviously, I know that should probably only apply to minor crimes, but then there will have to be safeguards in place to ensure that the criminal doesn't find out the address of the victim and vice versa, and the victim has all the support from the police station.
Restorative justice is not something that we do routinely at Barnet. It has its place, it is useful, and in fact actually it is one of the least popular things that criminals are engaged with. They hate doing it. So, the enemy of your enemy is your friend, so anything they hate doing, let's get them doing it.
Well, it sounds like exactly what they. It sounds like it's a taste of very strong medicine for them.
Yeah,
if they hate facing the victim.
Yes, they do hate facing the victim because it brings home the impact of what they've done. They can dehumanise it until you plonk a victim in front of them, and then they can't. Sir, on the right there. I'm sorry, I did say I'd go back to Mr. Shepherd, which I shall now do, and then I'll come to you, sir.
I might leave.
Has he left?
Yeah, listen to this question completely.
Pages 9 and 32 of the consultation document talk about each borough will have its own commander. Can you explain, or someone explain, why the city has its own force, though it's only got 8,000 residents and covers 1.2 square miles?
They pay for it.
Whereabouts, no they don't. No, they
The
don't.
Corporation of London pays for the city police.
No, the Corporation of London has been a tax haven for 1,000 years, excuse me.
Right.
It paid for very,
I'm not going to address the City of London.
Okay, right. But it puts in perspective our effort, your efforts to save money in policing outside the city. The other question concerns page 33. You talk about putting offenders into education because very often they're not being educated. Do I assume that only the state schools will be asked to take them and not the free schools? Second, on page 34, you refer to...
I'm afraid I'm going to have to stop you there, just on the grounds that so many people have got questions. Though I appreciate your attendance and your enthusiasm.
Well, I'm trying to adhere to the text.
Next. Yes, sir. After this one, yes.
Hello. I just wanted to ask, look, this weekend on Twitter, it was reported that there were 29 people in your custody suites in Colindale in a 24-hour period and that you have 25 custody suites. So I was just wondering if you are going to cut down the number of police stations, whether you feel you have the capacity should crime rise in the background of receipt.
Colindale Custody Suite is a real state-of-the-art thing. If anybody wants a tour of it, just come see me and I'll give you one. It is honestly a really, really efficient thing. We've got plenty of capacity to fill that place with burglars, so if you know any, tell us who they are. It really is, it's called a super suite. It's one of the 3 best in London, so keep them coming.
Good evening. Clearly it's a question of economics, and the police, in my view, their hands are tied in terms of budgets. And I'm encouraged to hear the previous gentleman who's now left to say that there'll be training of 5,000 additional officers. So that's very encouraging, and also reduction in the PCSOs. In my personal opinion, they don't exhibit the powers of arrest, and to be honest, you know, but a lot of people love them. You know, they're not proper police officers, and it does dilute the service, in my opinion. So I think going back to proper training, proper training for fully fledged police officers is the way forward. My worry is that when I drive down Connery Lane, I see a Knight Frank for sale sign outside the police training centre. Now, clearly, you know, economies of scale may be a question there in terms of parts of the site may be for sale.
We're building a brand new training facility on the Hendon site. That will involve releasing some land and some of the older buildings, but the new training facility will be able to cope with the new influx of officers, and it will again be I came through Hendon. I'm really proud of the fact that I came through Hendon, and I'm pleased that we're going to continue to train officers there.
Well, that should be the epicentre of training for the Met Police.
Yes.
And you know, it's encouraging to. Yeah, that's good to hear that. But my worry was when I saw a Knight Frank for sale sign outside the Colony.
No, we're selling off some of the buildings. Those big tower blocks that I was in during the hurricane of '87. That was entertaining. We're selling those. We're selling quite a bit of the land, but we're keeping. I could describe it to you, but we're keeping a training facility there.
Well, I do have suggestions. I attended a RUSI event actually recently, and I do have some suggestions regarding infrastructure going forward, not just for the Met, but for the actual police force in England and Wales. You know, there's clearly needs to be changes in infrastructure, and a lot of these buildings are archaic. You know, if you look at Muswell Hill, for example, it's a Victorian building, running cables, IT, infrastructure. It's not practical. So we're
lucky at Collindale. Collindale is a purpose-built, modern, state-of-the-art machine, but some of the others aren't. And let's be honest, some of our police stations are where they are, were placed where they are before the advent of the telephone. Never mind the internet. And I've never in 25 years, nobody has ever said to me, oh, I was going to tell the police this, but I didn't, because there isn't a front counter next door to me. People phone us, and if you phone us, as they say, we will come.
So my final point, sorry to interrupt you, sir. We're moving away from these sort of part-time, not fully trained police officers to fully fledged police officers, because that, in my view, has affected the police service, and it has diluted the service over the last, whenever they were introduced, because they're not properly trained officers. So we should move away from that.
Thank you for your support in what we're doing. I think you've had a question, Mark, so can I just come to some people who haven't? This lady here.
Thank you very much. Kathy Levine. I'm a resident in Cockfosters. I felt as though I was in a parallel universe a little bit earlier, because the gentleman from the London Assembly seemed to put forward a whole wish list of things that were going to happen. But my experience is not like that. My experience of living in Cockfosters is I've lived there for 40 years. I've not been burgled until the last 18 months, when I've been burgled twice. My neighbours, people living near me, have been burgled, and we live on a small estate, and it was just unknown before. I've never heard of any burglaries, and suddenly we've had a spate of burglaries. I hear that the amount of funding being given to Barnet is based on the fact that burglaries here are less than in Westminster. But I feel like we're on a trajectory in our area where burglaries are increasing.
Burglary is our #1 priority.
And the other, the thought that there's not going to be a police station in that side of the borough at all, and that the nearest one's going to be Collindale or Golders Green, is really worrying.
You may have picked up in the margins that I'm receptive to any criticism we have of the current plan.
Yeah, the other thing is I did appreciate when we did have a burglary that we did have we really did like so I think that was the next thing as well.
Thank you for that. Let's hope they phone you in the survey. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Usher. I'm a councillor for Hale Ward. Now, Hale Ward is famous for many things, but in particular it's famous for its size. Much reference has been made this evening to the size of the borough of Barnet, the size of the individual wards, and also the pressure on the individual teams by extraction, etc., etc. But my first question is in that regard: if the teams are going to work smarter, what equipment are you providing for them to enable them to work smarter? At the moment, for a member of the Hale team to get from his base to the edge of his ward, by the time he gets there he has to turn around, otherwise it's the end of his shift. Can we have more cars, more bicycles, more equipment, electric bicycles possibly? That is my first question. And my second question is, we've managed to go through all of the discussion this evening without mentioning neighbourhood watch. Now, with the very few police, as many, even if they increase, the relatively few police rely on the eyes and ears of the public, and that can be focused through the eyes and ears of neighbourhood watch. What support, recognition do you give to neighbourhood watch in this borough?
Okay, in terms of every vehicles, every one of the clusters of wards will have a vehicle. You say when he gets to the end of his ward he has to turn around and come back. Well, that's what we call patrol, and I want them out walking. I don't want them in cars. They don't prevent burglary driving past your house.
Stops on the way, he never gets to the end of the ward, to Stratford or whatever.
Right, I take your general point. They will have cars and kit that they need. We're going to give them, in the longer term, PDAs, so that they, as the Assistant Commissioner was saying, they can report stuff out on the street. They don't have to come back to a police station. In terms of your second point, it's straightforward, really. I mean, you're kind of right in what you say. And I mean, how do I add to that?
Do you support them? Do you agree with them? Do you recognise them?
Yes. I mean, they're absolutely vital. We have 330,000 pairs of eyes on the borough. If I could get all 330,000 focused looking at, you know, twitching windows, which is exactly what I want you to be doing. We had a fantastic result last week with a burglar arrested due to a neighbourhood watch contacting us and us attending promptly. So we hugely support the neighbourhood watch. One of the questions I've asked the community in the past is how come we have so many burglaries in areas that claim to have a neighbourhood watch? Some are better than others. And you know, through Simon Cllr and through Mark Strugnall, we will be into this year, into the new performance year, looking at which of those neighbourhood watches work really well and why do they work really well, and then ensuring that everybody comes up to that standard. It's the best way of keeping us safe is us doing it. Yes, sir.
Hi, thank you. It's Anders Schneiderman. I'm one of the ward councillors for Woodhouse. I just wondered, are you concerned that what we're losing here is the essence of neighbourhood policing? Because despite talking a lot still about keeping neighbourhood policing, going down to one officer per ward is a big change from the team we've got at the moment. And the teams that we had at the moment were able to do a lot of work in the community, residents were able to contact them. They did do late night operations, they did do late Saturday nights, they did cooperate with other teams, particularly in town centres, and they were still able to call on other teams to help them with respect to burglaries, etc. So I'm at a loss to see exactly how this model is an improvement on the neighbourhood model that we're going to lose.
Okay, it's an improvement because you can expect somebody to be on your ward for a far greater period of time than has been the case up to now. If your Safer Neighbourhoods team is day off today, you don't see anything. Well, that's not a very efficient way of policing your ward. What the Assistant Commissioner was describing as the local inspector being a sheriff, I mean, I've called them mini chief constables. They are expected to know and police their 4 wards with the team they've got. Now, sometimes it makes, efficiency-wise, it makes no sense whatsoever that if we come down to having nobody on that ward that day, it's not too difficult to work out. You can clearly see then, you know, they're not there. It makes far more sense that if we say, right, 7 days a week, you have the capability of putting one of 40 officers into that area. If there's a crime problem, we're not waiting till you're next on duty. For those of you who phoned up Safer Neighbourhood Spaces and left a message on their answering machine, that might be 3 days before somebody gets back to you. Well, that's not right either. So you will be able to contact them, you will see them, and they will be available on your ward for far longer. Yes, ma'am.
Tom. Not that I normally use, I'm having quite a loud voice. I wanted to raise 2 things actually. The first picks up from a question that was asked, has been asked several times around the closure of Whetstone and High Barnet. And I'm aware that both Southgate and Winchmore Hill, and I gather also Hartsmere, are losing front counters. And I would like to get a sense of what the rationale of leaving quite a large chunk of the north of the borough and neighbouring boroughs without a front counter is, because I think that really does worry me in the logic when you think about the challenges of cross-London orbital transport, particularly if you don't have a car. And the second actually was to really challenge, with respect, the issue about not seeing your Safer Neighbourhood teams around and about in the borough. My ward's East Finchley, the team, it would be very rare for me to be around and about in the ward without seeing team members. 10 o'clock at night, actually, on last Wednesday night, came out of the meeting and they were there because they were doing a particular patrol. And so one of the things that I would say and ask is how one PC and PCSO is going to be able to replicate the sort of genuine intelligence gathering of being on the ground a lot, being recognised and being able to informally pick up information from individuals, particularly young people, who develop a confidence in being able to share that with faces they know on the street. And I think I would genuinely be concerned about one PCSO PC team being able to replace that function.
Okay, I'll take your second point first. The thing to remember about the one-on-one thing is that's the very minimum. That is just to give you reassurance that there will definitely be a named officer and a deputy who will always be on the ward. So that's the reason we're saying that. But actually, the number of cops on your ward are going up, and so instead of having 2 per ward, you will have 6 to 8, and that makes them more flexible as a resource. Your first point about police stations, it's quite difficult to answer this without giving things away about what I believe should happen. I totally understand where you're coming from. I think Whetstone, and I'm just being honest here, is a bit of a done deal. I cannot justify opening it. And I'll let you into a secret. I have shut Whetstone several times and nobody noticed. I won't put cops in there. So dedicated front office staff, if they're sick or they don't turn up for work or for whatever reason, we just close it and nothing happens. So, because nobody has ever, and believe me, people are here, I think, one of the great things about working here is the passion that the local residents show for their own police. Nobody's ever written to say, I'm sorry, why have you closed Whetstone? Yeah, people write to me, believe me, talk to my staff office, people write to me a lot. Mr. Dismal.
Only when everyone else is finished, because I have quite a few things I want to say, which I would have said at our other meeting I can't say. So, when nobody else has had their say, I'd like to...
Are there any further questions? Yes, sir, with the very impressive moustache.
Thank you very much. I'm a local councillor, also from Mill Hill. My question is, I get the feel we're always talking about the crime has been committed, let's catch the baddies. It seems to me the wrong way around. Is there no way the police research the origins of, say, burglars or whatever? Suppose we're talking about burglaries as being the main thing. I get the feeling that the burglars themselves are not local very often. Some are, but they come from elsewhere. Now, do they come in droves? Do they come in gangs? Do they come singly? Is there any way of preempting the thing and catching them at source?
You're sitting not 5 yards away from DCI Gary Randall, who is in charge of what we call offender management. And it's exactly that. His job is to use our intelligence function to predict, as far as we can, who's currently out, who's currently active, and what proactive resource do we attach to that to ensure that they're caught in the act. So, yes, we do it.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
The reform section of this presentation has addressed that we have not got enough constables at the moment, and it's given us 1,000 more. On the other hand, on a cost-cutting measure, it's taking away 1,000 supervisors away.
Yeah.
It has never, in anywhere that I could see, addressed where those gaps or functions are being filled of those supervisors. Unless at the moment they're sat around doing nothing, you're losing functions, and this is not addressed.
Okay, in really, really simple terms, and I hope this doesn't come across as patronising or condescending, our supervisors are going to be working a lot harder, and that includes me. It means that there will be fewer. The ratio just goes up. We're looking at about a 1 in 10 ratio. 1 sergeant, 10 constables. That's higher than, it's about 1 to 6.5 at the moment. So it will be. It's not a question of sitting around doing. They're not currently sitting around doing nothing. That we are just going to have to structure ourselves in such a way. Some stuff we're just going to stop doing because it's, there aren't the hours in the day. But that stuff will not be front-facing. It will not be public-facing. It will be some of our internal processes. So, believe me, it is purely a question of those supervisors being more efficient and working harder. Is that it? Or, okay, I think one question from there, and then I think Mr. Dismal.
If I understand correctly, there is an issue of expenditure regarding number plate recognition systems or cameras in Barnet, because there is a high percentage of burglaries in Barnet in comparison to other boroughs in the Met. And this question has come up with neighbourhood watch teams, from my understanding.
Okay, let me answer that, or let me tell you where we are with ANPR. Mr. Cornelius has been very supportive of local police in trying to get ANPR onto the borough. I'll be frank with you and tell you that actually the problem is with the Met. We have so much ANPR in London that the system can't currently cope with any more. If you don't have it linked into the central system, it's pointless having it. So although the leader of the council had, we can buy all this stuff, I'm saying don't do it, because unless it's linked into our system, it's pointless. So bear with us. We will get more ANPR. Having the A1, the M1, the A1000, obviously fast roads are an issue here. And we really want to move towards is a system whereas if your car is stolen off your drive, we can put that into the ANPR immediately. We're not there yet, but we're heading that way. Mr. Hogan has a huge technological
expertise.
Fan, great word. He's pushing a lot of this stuff forward. I can see one solitary hand at the back, so just one final question from the back and then we'll go to Andrew.
Hi, I've actually lived in Hendon for the last 20 years with my family. Since 2007, my house has actually been burgled 4 times and I live on a dual carriageway, the Watford Way. We've been burgled 3 times since 2007, and the third one, the first one where they've taken cars and TVs and everything with my parents being in the house but them not knowing. Second time they ransacked the whole house, whereas the third time 2 men actually entered my property and brutally attacked my mum. They did leave her there for dead, obviously, because they don't care. And 3 weeks later she ended up in intensive care and I nearly lost her. And there's no form of CCTV on my road.
Ma'am, for lots of reasons which I hope you're going to understand, I'm going to take that out of this room. So, one of my staff who's sitting at the back there, I'm going to take you for a conversation and see how we can make a difference to you. Mr. Dismal.
Thanks for everyone for staying. This is, of course, about trying to deal with crime, and we've got the crime figures which show that in Barnet crime is going up, and in particular serious crime is going up. So really what this debate should be about is what we can do to resolve that particular issue. And what I'd like to do is just say a little bit first of all about safer neighbourhood teams and how they evolved, because Mr. Ashley's used about it. Well, some people... No, it's not a question. No, I said that I had a few points I'd like to make when everybody else has said their questions. If people don't want to hear and listen, they don't have to. But I'd like to make a few points which I would have made if we'd been allowed to have the meeting that we had booked and was cancelled by the council because they didn't think it was fair to have a consultation just with me and with other London members. I've got Val Shawcross here. I've got a member from the police committee and
Andrew,
the councillors.
The only thing is I have to be very careful here in that I cannot be seen to be at a political meeting. And if you're going to make political points, I'm sure that, valid, intelligent points, but I can't be seen to be here to be listening to them.
Well, they're not political points.
On that issue, I need to make that very clear. That was not a political decision in any way, shape or form.
Well, it's not a question. I want to make a few points. Okay, now if people don't want to listen, they can go. If they want to listen, they can stay. It's as simple as that. And they're not political points. I want to set out a few of the issues that have arisen tonight as I perceive them. And I'm not going to do it in a political way. And in fact, the leaflet which I've given out is a non-political leaflet. It was approved as such by the London Assembly authorities as a non-political leaflet. No reference to the Labour Party anywhere on it, if you'll see at the top.
Okay, so, I understand that, Andrew, so I'm going to ask my staff to withdraw with me, and if you have something you want to write to me on, of course. But in the meantime, if anybody else has any points they want to make, please write to me at the police station.
I'm not making a political speech.
There is a danger. Absolutely, and I meet with Mr. Dismore and listen to his point of view all the time. I'm available to meet you anytime, Andrew.
Anyway, I'm not making a political speech. I'm going to make some points that arise out of the discussion and the programme that was outlined earlier on. And if the presentation by the Deputy Mayor wasn't a political presentation, this will be no more political than that was. Okay? Now, the point I wanted to make about safer neighbourhoods is this predates your arrival at Borough, so you may not know the detail. We had one of the very first safe neighbourhood teams in Barnet, in Burnt Oak. At that time it had 6 people, and in the space of 6 weeks it cut antisocial crime by a third. A very successful programme. Then the safe neighbourhood teams were rolled out, and in Barnet we had much smaller, we had the same size teams as everywhere else. And I went to battle with the then Deputy Commissioner Tim Godwin to make the point that was made earlier on by somebody that I think it was Councillor Longstaff, that our wards are bigger and our population are bigger, and I won the argument that we should have 9 officers. And of course at that time the safe neighbourhood teams were also ring-fenced. They were not allowed to be taken off to do football matches or demonstrations. They were ring-fenced to our areas and were able to patrol, and they were continuing to be very successful. Now my concern about proposals for safer neighbourhoods generally is, first of all, as I mentioned earlier on, we're going to have a net loss of SNT officers compared to May 2010, which I think is a fair start point when the present government introduced the cuts programme. We'll have a net loss of SNT officers across the board of 54, not a net gain, as has been said. And we'll have a net loss of officers overall of 34, not a net gain, as has been said. Those are not my figures, those are figures that have come from answers to questions I put to Boris Johnson as the Mayor, and they're officially on record. So there's no political point there, that simply happens to be a fact. Now, my concern about the new model is this. It sounds very reminiscent of the old beat constable system we used to have before the safer neighbourhoods were introduced. I remember that each ward had 1 officer, or in those days could be extracted. I'm pleased that the difference is that officer won't get extracted now, but with holidays and so forth, there'll be an alternative. And what I've not heard is how this new structure of clustering is going to be any different from the old sector policing model, which was very similar to this, and was not considered to be successful in the way that the safer neighbourhood teams ultimately proved to be. The reason the safer neighbourhood teams have become less successful recently is simply because they're half the size that they used to be, and they'll get smaller. So that's my first concern about that. The lack of ring fencing and the fact that they will be smaller, and it looks like the sector-based team. The other lady, I think she's gone there, raised the question of supervision as well, and that's also something that concerns me. Not necessarily here, but I heard a story last week from a member of Parliament who told me about one of the problems that's arisen as a result of supervision, where in another borough, a young boy was arrested and found to be in possession of a very small amount of cannabis. He was then put in the back of the police van and strip searched. Now, I don't, in front of all the other officers, I don't really think that's an appropriate way to treat a young man, and he's only going to create resentment. Of course he shouldn't have a spliff, everybody knows that. If there's going to be strip search, he should have been taken to a station, and it should have been done officially. But that's what can happen if we have lesser supervisions. That's one of my concerns about that. Now, as far as police stations are concerned, and police station closures, the point I make about that, first of all, is this. This afternoon, during the Budget Committee at the Assembly, I asked Boris Johnson, who was giving evidence to us, this question. I asked him how much is going to be saved, in cash terms, by closing the police front counters. He didn't know the answer. I asked him how much it was going to cost to provide new contact points. He didn't know the answer to that either. So my concern here is that this all is going to happen without actually potentially resulting in any savings at all. My concern about the contact, and I understand the point about people not turning to the police station, but what Adrian may not know is this. I went to have my photo taken outside Whetstone Police Station for our leaflet, some of you may have seen it, and I was with Barry and Alison and a few others. In the half an hour we were there, 4 people turned up to that closed police station wanting to report something or seeking advice on something. One wanted to report something about her changing nationality. I forget what the other things were, but 4 people turned up in half an hour, and they were read out